Alda entertained us as Hawkeye Pierce for 11 years. When the cameras stopped shooting, however, he was concealing an anguish that would follow him for decades. He is now disclosing the true events on MASH. The episode that broke the cast apart, the tragic story that was too dark for television, and the co-star who departed because of him. The account of MASH that America was unaware of. In New York City, Alda was born on January 28, 1936. Abruzzo, whose full name was Alfonso Joseph D. Actor and singer Robert Alda was his father. Joan Brown, his mother, had won a beauty pageant in the past. Alan had been involved in show industry from the beginning. Alan's early years were mostly spent backstage as his father performed in vaudeville and burlesque. He saw musicians, comedians, and dancers hone their skills. He was surrounded by live performance energy. Though uncertain, the world was thrilling. Life was unsettled because of the frequent travel required by his father's job. At the age of 7, Alan's childhood took a turn for the worst. He was polio-infected in 1943. A condition that caused many kids to have permanent impairments. It was the only painful treatment available. Every hour, he had to wrap his limbs in warm wool blankets to aid in the recovery of his muscles. Because they were unable to pay for a nurse, his parents administered the treatments on their own. Even when it appeared impossible, his parents put in endless effort to lessen his suffering. He was unable to move much for a time. His left arm was the only part of his body that he could control at one time. He was profoundly affected by the encounter. The weight of his parents' love was felt by him when he witnessed their sacrifice. He developed the ability to endure suffering even in the face of despair. For the remainder of his life, he maintained that resilience. His childhood was complicated by his mother's difficulties. Joan Brown was graceful and composed. But she also struggled with mental health problems. There were moments when her feelings caused conflict in their house. Alan learned how to read people's emotions and adapt as a child. He had a talent for understanding people, which subsequently influenced his acting. His ultimate decision to seek a profession in entertainment represented a shift in his relationship with his family as well as his independence. He chose Alfonso, the first two initials of his father's first name, as well as the initial two letters of his mother's initials, Brown. Thus, Alda was born out of Alfonso d'Abruzzo. The name was straightforward and easy to recall, but it also had a hint of his parents. When he started attending Fordham University in New York, he wasn't solely focused on his studies. He jumped right into acting and joined WFUV, the university's radio station. He gained experience in bringing characters to life just with his voice while working on radio plays. There was more to college than just performing. Alda spent his junior year acting in Rome and studying in Paris. He was exposed to a variety of theatrical forms while traveling. It helped him better grasp how culture influenced performances and how stories are told. Upon his return to the United States, he continued to refine his abilities. After joining the Compass Players, he went to Chicago to join Second City. He was forced to trust his gut and think quickly by these improv groups. They helped him learn how to be present in the moment, which would be a useful ability for the remainder of his career. With the help of a Ford Foundation grant in the late 1950s, Alda was able to work at the Cleveland Playhouse. To Dorothy, A Son, Heaven Come, Wednesday, Monique, and Job were among the many productions in which he appeared. These parts helped him develop by putting him on stage with more seasoned performers. However, he did more than merely perform in his early years. He had fought against polio as a child. His parents used a treatment that involved stretching his muscles and wrapping him in warm woolen blankets when he was just 7 years old. Despite the pain, it was effective. The resilience he learned from that early battle would serve him well throughout his life. In 1959, he made his Broadway debut with Only in America. That was only the start. He starred as Charlie Cacioppi in Purlie Victorious in 1961. He then starred in the romantic comedy Fair Game for Lovers in 1964, which allowed him to showcase his charisma and comedic timing. This performance was the one that truly got people's attention. At about the same time, he began making television appearances. He became a member of That Was the Week That Was, a 1964 to 1965 humorous news program. He was exposed to a far larger audience and was able to hone his comedic abilities. He starred in The Owl and the Pussycat in a daring part that same year. In the film, he portrayed Felix the Owl, opposite Diana Sands. The play gained notoriety for its humor alone, but for something much more significant. A kiss was exchanged on stage between Alda and Sands, who was black. The incident caused controversy because, at the time, that was uncommon. They even got hate mail. But whether on or off stage, Alda never backs down from a challenge. He ventured into filmmaking with Paper Lion in 1968. He portrayed journalist George Plimpton, a writer who works for the Detroit Lions in order to gain first-hand knowledge of professional football. The part allowed Alda to blend comedy and drama, and he was able to compete with real-life football players like Joe Schmidt and Alex Karras. 2 years later, he starred opposite Marlo Thomas in Jenny, a more serious film. A young man and a pregnant woman negotiating an unexpected relationship was the focus of the movie. Even though it was a minor movie, it demonstrated that he could handle humor and tragic material equally. Despite these achievements, Alda found it difficult to maintain stability in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He tried to make ends meet by bouncing between modest television roles. He appeared on game programs such as What's My Line? And I Have a Secret. The week that was, he was given guest appearances on The Phil Silvers Show. None of these jobs, however, provided him with the necessary breakthrough. Industry insiders were aware of his talent. However, he had yet to secure the kind of part that would catapult him to stardom. But then everything was different. After playing Captain Benjamin Franklin Hawkeye Pierce on MASH, Alan Alda became well known. The program chronicled the life of medical professionals at a mobile army hospital during the Korean War and ran from 1972 to 1983. Despite being a war program, it wasn't about fighting. People were attempting to live in an intolerable circumstance. They used humor as a shield against the atrocities they witnessed. Hawkeye was the best example of that. He was a really good surgeon. However, he never paid much attention to authority. He made jokes, played practical jokes, and questioned all the rules that didn't make sense. But beneath it all was a sincere concern for others. He was able to rescue lives, but he was unable to stop the war. Hawkeye was named after the last of the Mohicans. The character was courageous and resourceful in the tale. It was true of Alda's Hawkeye in MASH. In his personal struggles, he used scalpels and words instead of firearms. He defended his patients, challenged commanders, and went to all lengths to prevent himself and his pals from becoming insane. Although his listeners were amused by his rapid wit, they felt the weight of war because of his sadness and rage. Hawkeye was the focal point of the episode because of Alda's performance. Audiences couldn't get enough of his character, but several cast members thought the emphasis had shifted too much toward him. MASH rose to prominence as a television program. It was a statement as well as entertaining. Although the show was set in Korea, its message was unmistakable, and it was shown during the height of the Vietnam War. The war was brutal. It ruined people in ways that went beyond injuries. Alda assumed greater creative authority as the series progressed. In addition to acting, he also wrote and directed. His greatest accomplishment occurred in the last episode, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. His co-writing and directing contributed to the show's memorable conclusion. Millions of viewers watched MASH's final moments on February 28, 1983. They were historic figures. There were 121 million viewers overall, with over 105 million watching live. When it was shown, it was the most watched television show ever. It was more than a farewell in the conclusion. It was a mirror of all the experiences the characters had undergone. Their weariness, their sorrow, and their frantic efforts to maintain their humanity were all caught. A few of the instances were humorous. Others were devastating. Despite the end of the war, nobody was safe. Every scene had weight thanks to Alda. Every farewell felt genuine. Its audience surpassed that of any scripted program for almost 30 years. The impact of Alda on MASH extended well after the show's last episode. He contributed to the identity of the show. He ensured that it made people think rather than just chuckle. It was not only about soldiers and tactics in war. The doctors were trying to save lives. People were pushed into a circumstance they never requested. Alda thought the greatest way to tell such stories was with humor. A little laughter could lighten the terrible. However, viewers were always reminded of the truth underlying the jokes. Tensions inside MASH increased as Alda's influence on the show expanded. According to certain cast members, Hawkeye had become the show's dominant character. He had an indisputable presence and a significant impact on the program. Hawkeye Pierce's close friend and jovial surgeon, Trapper John McIntyre, was portrayed by Wayne Rogers. Hawkeye and Trapper were intended to be equals when MASH started. The focus of the episode was their friendship. Rogers anticipated his role to be a reflection of that. However, Alda's character became the main focus of the series. He was directing and writing in addition to acting. His might continued to increase, and the equilibrium changed. In Rogers' opinion, Trapper was turning from a co-lead to a sidekick. He became frustrated. The persona he had committed to portraying was vanishing. He didn't have any serious disagreements with Alda, but it was challenging to stay because of the show's creative approach. 3 seasons later, he made the decision to quit. His departure was sudden. The show failed to properly say goodbye to Trapper. He was present one day and then absent the next. Fans were not given an emotional farewell or time to come to terms with his leaving. Rogers left. He was the obvious lead in Trapper John, MD, which gave him another opportunity to play Trapper. At the same time, MASH debuted BJ as a new character. In the role of Honeycutt, Mike Farrell. He was a different kind of mate for Hawkeye, more gentle and grounded. As the show developed further, it demonstrated that it could withstand significant cast changes. Years later, Alda and Farrell got into a heated argument about creativity. It occurred in an episode titled Preventative Medicine during Season 7. The narrative tracks Hawkeye's decision to take severe measures. Not because the man is ill, but rather to prevent him from sending more soldiers to their deaths, he wishes to remove the appendix of a careless commander. J.B. refuses to participate. He considers it a blatant ethical transgression. That dispute wasn't limited to the screenplay. It was real. BJ, Farrell thought, would never back such a thing. And Alda thought Hawkeye would. The episode was strengthened by their argument. Viewers were left with a challenging question by the story, rather than a definitive right or wrong. Is there ever a situation when avoiding injury justifies unethical behavior? Hawkeye proceeds with the procedure. But rather than feeling heroic, it haunts him. MASH had transformed by the time it reached its last episode in 1983. No longer was it merely a comedy. It was now something far more profound. One of the most watched TV shows ever is the series finale, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. Hawkeye's breakdown is at the heart of it. A plotline based on actual accounts of PTSD from Korean War veterans. Alda, who directed and co-wrote the ending, aimed to depict the lingering consequences of conflict. Hawkeye was the sharp-tongued, quick-witted surgeon who had always been unraveling. His trauma's full impact became apparent when a suppressed memory came back to him. The concept of PTSD was not well known at the time. A lot of veterans endured silent suffering. The problem gained attention thanks to MASH. Alda continued to work hard after MASH finished in 1983. He was ready for a change after more than 10 years as Hawkeye Pierce. He transitioned into directing while continuing to take on performing jobs that presented him with new challenges. The 4 Seasons, which he directed in 1981, was one of his first significant motion pictures. He not only directed it but also wrote and performed in it. The film follows 3 couples who went on annual vacations together, illustrating the evolution of their relationships and friendships over time. There was more to it than a light-hearted comedy. It had genuine moments, honesty, and depth. Critics commended Alda for her ability to deliver a compelling story, and audiences found it relatable. It was evident that he was talented in areas other than acting. As he developed his directing career, he kept taking on playing parts that showcased his versatility. In 1989, he had one of his most remarkable performances in Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors. In his role, he portrayed Lester, a pleasant but conceited TV executive. It was a role unlike anything he had ever played. And he performed it with the ideal balance of haughtiness and humor. He received honors from the National Board of Review and the New York Film Critics Circle for his performance. It also demonstrated his ability to transition between comedy and drama with ease. He had become more than just a TV actor with the 4 Seasons, as well as the Crimes and Misdeeds. His ability to mold a project both in front of and behind the camera made him a storyteller. He achieved yet another career milestone almost 10 years later. In Martin Scorsese's The Aviator, he portrayed Senator Owen Brewster in 2004. He faced Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Howard Hughes, in a tight political role. The movie received 5 Academy Award wins and 11 nominations, making it a major hit. Alda gave a great performance. Without making him a straightforward antagonist, he gave Brewster a smart, aspirational, and cunning personality. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars for his work. It proved he was still developing as an actor despite decades in the business. Science was Alda's passion outside of performing and directing. He took over as the host of Scientific American Frontiers in 1993, a PBS program highlighting the latest medical and scientific advancements. He wasn't merely a presenter, though. He engaged in conversations with scientists, participated in experiments, and had genuine queries. He had a talent for simplifying complex concepts, which made the audience relate to the program. In one of the episodes, he was testing a prototype VR car. He was motion sick from the encounter. However, it was left in the show rather than removed. Things like those made the show entertaining and interesting. During its 15-season run, Scientific American Frontiers encouraged many young viewers to seek careers in science. As children, some of them even made an appearance on the show before going on to become scientists. As the series came to an end in 2005, Alda's devotion continued. At Stony Brook University, he established the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science in 2009. Scientists are trained by the center to communicate their findings in an understandable and interesting way. Alda thought science should be accessible to all, not just specialists. His contributions to the event and the center left a lasting impression, demonstrating that narrative isn't limited to television and film. It has the power to alter people's worldviews. The meeting of Alan Alda and Arlene Weiss seemed to be fated. In 1956, they were attending a dinner party that a mutual friend had thrown. A handmade rum cake fell to the kitchen floor from the counter at some point during the evening. While most guests paused, Alan and Arlene did not. Both of them bit into it without hesitation. They were united by that brief, impromptu moment. Alan has been making jokes about how they were inseparable after eating that cake for years. On March 15, 1957, a year later, they were married. Their partnership was based on mutual understanding, trust, and fun from the beginning. Alan was often accompanied by Arlene, a writer and photographer. Through all the highs and lows of Hollywood, she was there for him, keeping their home a safe haven. She's often credited by Alan with keeping him in check. She labored behind the scenes to keep their private lives safe while his career flourished. It wasn't just lavish romantic gestures that characterized their marriage. The little things that kept them together were important. Their morals and sense of humor were similar, and they continued to enjoy each other's company. Years later, they confronted Alan's Parkinson's diagnosis jointly, just as they had handled everything else. As Alan's career took off, he and Arlene had to make a decision. They desired a typical life for their family, away from the demands of Hollywood. Their 3 daughters, Eve, Elizabeth, and Beatrice, were brought up with that objective in mind. Despite his fame as an actor, Alan was merely a father at home. Despite his hectic schedule, he always made time to be present for significant events. Their home life remained stable thanks in large part to Arlene. She established a place where their daughters could develop without having to worry about being famous. There was tales, laughter, and a feeling of normalcy during family time. Alan has frequently claimed that his girls helped to keep him modest. He would be made fun of for his acting jobs, ensuring he didn't ever take himself too seriously. Over time, their daughters discovered their own trajectories. They remained near their parents, had families, and developed careers. Something unusual had been accomplished by the Aldas. Despite Hollywood's unpredictability, they managed to maintain their family life. Alan became aware of minor alterations in his body in 2015. He began to act out dreams while he slept, and his thumb began to shake a little. When he visited the doctor, Parkinson's disease was the diagnosis. He was slow to break the news. He required time to consider the implications for his future. He made the decision to go public in 2018, 3 years later. He wanted to share his diagnosis with the public on his own terms, so he did so this morning on CBS. Above all, he wished to assist people. Rather than allowing Parkinson's to slow him down, he actively managed it. To keep his body robust, Alan concentrated on moving. His routine included marching to music, playing singles tennis, and taking up boxing. He talked candidly about his experience in the hopes of inspiring others going through similar struggles. He sent a clear message. A diagnosis does not end life. There are still a ton of things to do and enjoy. However, Alan Alda's role as MASH's Captain Benjamin Hawkeye Pierce was more than just a significant turning point in his career. Alda has acknowledged that playing Hawkeye made him face his worst anxieties, particularly those related to death and life. The character's sarcasm and keen wit were more than merely personality qualities. These served as coping strategies. A strategy to combat the atrocities of war. Hawkeye's hardships reflected Alda's own beliefs on death and the human condition in many respects. Alda has acknowledged that, in spite of his achievements, he has battled imposter syndrome all of his professional life. Despite receiving 6 Emmy Awards for MASH, he frequently felt inadequate. One day, he feared, people will understand that he wasn't deserving of the accolades he had earned. His fear drove him to always prove himself, take on new tasks, and never give up. Alan Alda's career is a narrative of skill, commitment, and a passion for telling stories. In honor of his significant influence on television, he was admitted into the Television Hall of Fame in 1994. In addition to being an actor, he was also a director and writer. Renowned in particular for his work on MASH. During its 1972 to 1983 run, the program gained notoriety for fusing humor with weighty subjects. The way it addressed violence, morality, and the human cost of battle was unprecedented. Hawkeye Pierce, the figure created by Alda, was not like other battle heroes. He was sardonic, defiant, and always had a joke ready. On the inside, though, he was incredibly kind. Because of his portrayal, Hawkeye became one of the most recognizable figures in television history. After MASH, Alda continued to influence the industry. In order to give his characters more nuance, he took on new roles in television and movies. His influence was so significant that he was honored with the SAG Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019. This honor is bestowed for actors who have left a lasting impression on the business by their contributions to the trade as well as their performances. The Los Angeles Shrine Auditorium served as the venue for the wedding. When Tom Hanks presented him, he set the tone for a kind, considerate, and wise speech. Alda talked about how crucial empathy is in both life and acting. His recent diagnosis of Parkinson's disease made his statements much more significant. He didn't let it stop him, though. He continued to act, to promote science and communication, and to remind people of the importance of telling stories. Like his love of performing, he has a tremendous enthusiasm for assisting others. He was the narrator of Fighting for Life in 2005. A unique television show created by St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. He had a deep affection for this cause. He and his spouse, Arlene, were good friends with Marlo Thomas, who had dedicated years of her life to procuring money for the hospital that her father, Danny Thomas, established. Alda and Marlo Thomas had previously collaborated on the children's CD Free to Be, You and Me, which encouraged equality and individuality, in the early 1970s. Alda advocated for women's rights long before it was popular in Hollywood. He served as the chair of the Equal Rights Amendments Men's Committee and was named to the International Women's Year Commission. These duties weren't merely symbolic. His influence was being used to advocate for substantive change. Alda has always told stories. Never Have Your Dog Stuffed, his debut memoir, was released in 2005. Any further knowledge I've gained. There were many painful and humorous personal tales in the book. His stay in Chile while filming Scientific American Frontiers was one of the most striking. He developed a potentially fatal illness where his intestines become strangled. He shocked them by knowing the medical jargon when the physicians described the issue. It was while working on MASH that he had learned them. However, the novel was not solely about dramatic scenes. A childhood event inspired the title. His father tried to help by having his pet dog stuffed when it passed away. The end effect was so disturbing that Alda gained a crucial insight. You have to let go sometimes, no matter how terrible it is. In 2008, he released Things I Overheard While Talking to Myself, his second memoir. It combined life lessons from lectures he had given over the years with personal memories. In 2017, he published If I Understood You, Would I Have This Look on My Face, his third novel. Its main focus was communication, a topic Alda had studied for years. His interests extended beyond performing. His goal was to learn more about how individuals connect, listen, and improve their communication.